August? I started this in August? Holy crap, I don't even remember half the stuff I did on this. Donut with sprinkles. Dude, I don't remember anything from this. I'll have to finish this tutorial. I'll have to like rewatch the entire thing. Man, walking sucks. Walking all day staring at your computer screen kinda sucks. Window capture. Blender, please. Got the donut. But we also got Untitled. Oh man, I'm exhausted. Solid mode. What's that called? Tell me. Why won't it tell me? I want to know. How wanna know your name? What's that song? I wanna know your name. I wanna know everything about you, girl. Wanna know your name. Man. Wait, what happens when I pull up Spotify here? Doesn't it show the song playing? Oh, okay. I don't know if I'm on the right account, but this is also appearing over my face, which is wrong. Oh, hello, there's my cursor. Oh, it's his top song? Is that his top song? Okay, so that's showing up, right? Isn't isn't one of them supposed to be like? Yeah, it's supposed to be color keyed. What the hell? Oh, there we go. Now I'm missing some cropping. So let's do 820. Ooh, that's nice. Okay. I think that's about it. Great. What a hype song. I wanna know your name. I wanna know your name.
What's your name?
That's amazing.
Okay, so this should have auto duck. Auto duck volume. No, not working. Auto duck the volume. That seems to work okay, actually. Alright, so this is me this morning. Oh no. There we go. Good profile picture.
No.
God, I love that guy. I love Too Mellow. Why am I so tired? I don't even know. You know, let me do the stupid Blender donut tutorial. Beginner tutorial part 1. Part 2 basic modeling. I don't even remember what the hell. What the hell was I even doing?
If you've just opened Blender for the first time, it's also another object right up. Now we know how Blender functions. Let's start building that
Blender
donut.
4? I'm pretty
So,
sure it's like
as
Blender
before, let's
3.
well, first of all, just to repeat, make sure you are working with a new scene, completely new scene. Don't want any remaining. Without getting too technical, this is kind of a fakery. It's sort of like the shader is telling the renderer that this is a really high poly dense mesh when it really isn't. It's just basically kind of like averaging out faces, and anyway, it's very technical, but basically means it's not going to add anything to your render time, but it's going to look smoother. And so this is generally what you want for something that is smooth and organic looking, like we want. If you were rendering like architectural or like hard surfaces, like later on we're going to put this on a counter, then the object would obviously want to be flat. But in our case, we're just going to use shade smooth. But you might notice that looking at this, especially if you go side on, that you've got this sort of jagged shape around here, right? So the silhouette is really breaking that illusion that this is a high poly or a smooth looking donut. But thankfully, rather than adding all of that complex density into the mesh itself and then making it hard to remove later on, there is another way through modifiers. So if we go over here to our properties, right, this very confusing, lots of option looking properties, click on the wrench, and this is the section called modifiers. And this is one of those object dependent things. So if you've got your camera selected, you won't see it. So it's only when you've got actual meshes that you might see this modifier here. So it's much easier to explain if we just add one. So up here, add modifier, and you got a range of options here that can do a whole number of things. The one that we're looking for is underneath generate, and it is called subdivision surface.
I've done this?
And it
Okay,
is a
I've done this.
really common modifier that you use all the time. In fact, it's so common, it's actually, you can just immediately add it to any object just by hitting Control 1. But don't do that because we've already got it, so there. Now, some of you might have just discovered that your donut has disappeared. If that is the case, you need to go to Edit, Preferences, and then underneath Viewport, where it's got Subdivision at the very bottom, Disable GPU Subdivision. That will then make the subdivision perform on your CPU instead of your GPU, which is maybe non-existent or not performing whatever, but levels viewport to 0. This is our original mesh. This is before we add the subsurface, essentially. When we increase this, you can see that it is adding resolution to our mesh. And the more I increase this viewport levels here, the finer and finer that detail becomes. So to explain it, because this is such a very, very common modifier, it's kind of important to understand how it's working. You can see that this is these squares here, these are called faces, by the way. And for each one of these faces here, as I add a level, you can see it's becoming 4 faces, right? And then now if I zoomed in on this one face here, if I do another level, that's now become 4 faces. And then if I zoom in again, it's now become 4 faces. So it's exponentially adding detail. And you might also know that it is smoothing it out as well. Like this jagged edge that we've got here, you can see now becomes smoother. So to quickly visualize that, if I just draw it, like imagine you've got like a 90-degree left click, and there it is. Now if I go back with a scroll wheel, you can also in something that looks weird. It's got a bunch of little one, even for our final pretty image. They're only, forgot to mention, go back into edit mode with tab. Donuts, when they're sitting in the little vat thing, right, they're only like half submerged, so then they have to be flipped. But it means that the bit that's nearest to the surface is getting less heat. So essentially what I'm saying is the bit that's around the donut, the circumference of it is usually a little bit flatter. So donuts aren't like perfectly round all the way around. They're usually a little bit flatter. So what I want to do is I want to select these vertices along here, and then I want to shrink them. Now I could go around one by one like this, which is actually what I used to do when I was learning Blender pre-YouTube days, and there was no tutorials. I would do this if I wanted to select this. Silly, because there's a function, a tool for that. and it is edge select. So if you hold down Alt on your keyboard and then do a single left click on not the points, but on the edge, right? This little line, that line is now selected. So if I want to shrink this, right? What would I do? Well, I mean, yeah, you could like move it around, right? We want to shrink it. We want to change the scale of it. So we would use the hotkey S for scale. So S, and I'm going to scale that in. I actually don't want proportional editing. So I'm going to turn that off and now scale in and just make it a little bit flatter. And there you go. See, it just feels a little bit more natural, doesn't it? It looks a little bit closer to what a donut looks like. And by the way, don't worry if yours doesn't look exactly like this, like your lump is a little bit off. Like some people get a little bit too precious with the tutorial. Like I got to match exactly everything I do. Like I'm just working on the fly as well. So just make what you think looks good. Maybe you think this is not misshapen enough and you want to add more, go for it, because it might actually turn out better than what mine is. Now, before we move to the next part, how to save. How to save. Blender, very, very easy. You just go save as, and you just get one file.
It's literally every other program. Like, why would it be any different?
Very literal file extension. Really pushing the limits of what a file extension can be. That's almost a word, Blender. Anyway, .blend, and that's it. And then next time you open it up, it's exactly like it. Did you guys know that Blender 4.0 had a change that makes it more realistic by default? Or that there's a new technology that is going to expand the uses for 3D exponentially? Well, you would if you were on my free newsletter called This Week in 3D. It's an email from me once a week with 3 to 5 things that I found interesting that week from the world of 3D. So sometimes I share a new tool that I found. Key for it, you could just go Object, and then you'd find it here, where you've got 2 objects, and just typing in the object. The other way, you can name something. I'll just show you the second way. If you select the Taurus 0.001, that's your icing object. Name something without having to go up to the outline. F2, that's another very where your cursor, is over the 3D viewport. If you hit F2, that's another very quick way that you can a tab. So we want the icing on the top, which means this bottom half of our mesh here is redundant. Don't need it. So we want to delete it. So if we just dragged over the bottom here, you can see it looks like we've selected the bottom half of our donut, but if you were to move around, you would see, oh, we haven't actually. It's only selected, annoyingly, what is facing the camera. Where there's a mesh, it's not gone through the mesh. A lot of users find this annoying. I agree. Sometimes it seems like that would be the more default X-ray. If you turn anytime, just over there, with flickering in the background, and I'm like, so adding another modifier. Make sure you've got your icing selected, not your donut. And then here where you've got add modifier, we're going to go generate solidify. Okay. Now it's made it worse. It's actually added a thickness to our mesh there, but it's actually done it the wrong way. So it's with the normals. Yeah, what is it? It's trying to put the extra bit inside the donut. So we can change that by just changing the offset here in the solidifier settings. Just drag that all the way to 1.
Okay, cool.
Some of you might have actually found that it was correct before, just depending on which way your normals were. If that's the case, keep it at -1, but everyone else, keep it at 1. We just want to make sure it's actually outside. Okay, look more like icing. So to it is the one that you... So proportional editing on. And now, as I move it down, let's just lower the slider way down here, and then let's pull this to it is the one that you uncheck, which means in object mode, and move it down, you can see that it's working, but it would be, again, a lot of effort to go round and round and do these one by one. So we want to use that old familiar proportional fall-off tool again. So proportional editing on, and now as I move it down, let's just lower the slider way down here, and then let's pull this down. Okay, now we'll find issues. If we move to the side here, we can see the first issue we've discovered is that this is separating from our mesh here. And that's not what icing does. When it dribbles down, it follows the shape of the donut all the way down. So what we want to do is snap, undo it a number of times, snap the vertices to our donut underneath it, right? So for that, we need to turn on snapping up here. Okay, now there are a number of ways to snap in Blender. The default way is increment, which just means the like the grid floor there. Like if you were to just like move it around, you can see it's just snapping to the grid floor. Not helpful. But we want to snap it to the face. And now with face snapping enabled, if we move this down, we can see, let's just look here, that the bottom bit is snapping to the face, but as you might have seen, the top bits, the rest of essentially what is inside of our circle of influence with this proportional editing, that's not being affected. Only the little point that we had selected was affected. So that's not what we want either. Normally that would be enough, but in this particular case, we want to also snap individual elements too. And let's go face project. Now, when we pull this down, you should see that these are also no longer clipping through the donut. But still, we have issues. Why is that? Well, it is actually working correctly. We can see these are not going through the mesh. So why does it look like it is? The reason for that is that there's actually just not enough information here. So if we go side on, you can see, right, like we've got this point here, and then we've got another point down here, and then we've got this long stretch in between, right? So that means that this part of the donut, oh gosh, that goes that goes around like that is just not, there's nothing to snap it to, essentially. So what we need to do to fix this is just add more geometry. So these little vertices here, we need more of those vertices. So we can do that by actually using the subdivision surface modifier. Because although it is a modifier, you can apply the modifier. And the modifier currently is adding geometry, so let's just apply it. So to apply it, we just click this little drop down here next to the modifier and then go apply. Now, if we, nothing should have changed from this view because the same information is being displayed. But in edit mode, you should now see exponentially more faces, because here, where there was, one face before, you can see there's now a lot more, right? 4x, okay, 4x, okay. So now if we pull down, we should see it is snapping. And if we go into this mode, you can see that it's now conforming to the mesh in a much more snug way, because there's information there for it to use. Now this shading artifact here that we can see, this, don't worry about that, we'll fix that in just a moment. But I need to show, because I've shown you like 4 long stretch to fix. Actually, let's go apply. Now, if we, nothing should have changed from this view because the same information is being displayed. But in edit mode, you should now see exponentially more faces, because here, where there was, one face before, you can see there's now a lot more, right? 4x, okay, 4x, okay. So now if we pull down, we should see it is snapping. And if we go into this mode, you can see that it's now conforming to the mesh in a much more snug way, because there's information there for it to use. Now this shading artifact here that we can see, this, don't worry about that, we'll fix that in just a moment. One more, because if I pull down and if I scroll up, you'll see something. Okay, if I was to click, we get this horrible problem here. And I've done this tutorial enough, and enough people have hit this issue that I need to call it out specifically, because it seems to be a big point that a lot of people just don't know where to go from. What's happened is if we use what's it called, the circle of influence for our proportional editing, if that is so high, it's actually high enough to reach the mesh on the other side of the donut. And then because we've got snapping, it's now projecting that, snapping it to the front, which is creating this like something that's a nightmare to fix. In fact, it's easier just to start from scratch than to try to fix that. So if we want, sorry, there's a lot of noise. To fix this, we need to hide the part of the mesh that we don't want to be influenced by our proportional tool, right? So to do that, there is an easy way to do it. We can actually do it very precisely. So if with this middle bit of our donut here, if I just hold down Alt and then do a left click, as I mentioned before, that selects the ring, okay? And we could do that all the way up, but actually there's a little, I don't know if it's an Easter egg. It's kind of a cool tool that not many people know about. Control plus. That will enable the select more tool. And if you use Control plus, Control minus goes the other way, you can see that it's expanding out. So Control plus will just like select the next vertice along a chain, roughly speaking. And you can see we can very quickly select all the parts of the mesh that we don't need. Right?
That's just
very
zooming.
Cool. By the way, if
know what he's talking about.
Control, that will not people, but actually there's a little, Okay. Easter egg. It's kind of a cool tool that not many people know about. Control Plus. That will enable the Select More tool. And if you use Control Plus, Control Minus goes the other way, you can see that it's expanding out. So Control Plus will just like select the next vertex.
I don't know if he's on Mac or something, but that does not work.
See, that not many people know about. Control Plus. That will enable the Select More tool. And if you use Control Plus, Control Minus goes the other way. Chain, roughly, don't need. Right? Very cool. By the way, if Control Plus doesn't work for you because you're on a laptop or something else, Select More, Less. You can also do it here. Anyways, to hide this part of the mesh, it's H. H for hide. So when you're in this state, it looks as though it's been deleted. It's very, sometimes you don't know where part of your mesh, and then you forgot that you've got hide turned on. If parts of your mesh are hidden and you want to bring it back, it's Alt-H. So H to hide and then Alt-H to bring it back. Or if you can't remember it for whatever reason, you can also find it. Okay, it's underneath mesh. There we go. Mesh. Reveal hidden or hide selected. Okay, so that's the other way. But you can get my keyboard shortcut. It's in the link. It's free. Just use that and then you won't forget a lot of these handy shortcuts. Find it and it will work correctly. Haha. So now we get to now finally be an artist and go like, what sort of, edge or what sort of icing do I want to make this look like? So what I'm doing here, by the way, is I'm hitting G to pull it down, and then I'm just single middle click, and then because my cursor is closest to the Z-axis, it's now snapping it to the Z-axis. So that's why I mentioned before that it's really handy. You don't have to think of the letter and type it in. You just go in the general direction you want to go, and then just tap the middle click of the, which is your scroll wheel, right? Middle click. It's such a weird button that you have to call it out. It's the scroll wheel button, because it's like no of the, which is your scroll wheel, right? Middle click. It's such a weird button that you have to call it out. It's the scroll wheel button, because it's like no other application seems to use it besides scrolling. But Blender is like, no, we're going to use it for like 90% of the operations is going to be middle click. But anyways, as you can see, I'm not paying particularly too much attention to it, but I'm just making a wavy looking shape around it. You might also want to make some bits that go the opposite direction, right? And then maybe pull, so you've got like big shapes as well as medium shapes and some small shapes. Big, medium, small. It's the recipe for appealing design. Big, medium, and small details. But I digress. By the way, I should mention, if you're stuck, don't feel bad, because there was certainly a lot of finickiness going on with this donut here, and we're definitely in the steep part of that curve at the moment. Do make use of my Discord if you are stuck. I created it literally so that people could get instantaneous help. I don't have any other benefit for it, so it's there so that you can find help. Link is in the description, and there's like donut help chat room where you can post screenshots of your problem and then people can help each other out. So do make use of that. Now, our shading issue here, this darkened edge, is actually going to fix itself by fixing another issue. So it's a two birds, one solution kind of problem. This 90-degree edge here for this icing, not ideal. Everybody knows that a real icing would create like a rounded edge there, right? So we can fix that just by adding another subsurf modifier. Because you might remember I mentioned, like, yes, if you've got 3 vertices, it'll create like another vertex here and another vertex here, but it'll also like round it out. It'll pull this one back, so you end up with a rounded corner. So right here in your modifier stack, we're going to go add modifier, generate subdivision surface. Now, the order of these does matter, okay? You want your solidifier at the top and the subdivision after it. So Blender works top to bottom, and it's important it's in this way because you want the extrusion to happen first, and then in order to round that edge, it has to happen as a secondary step. So solidify on top, subdivision underneath. Now, whilst we're here and we're looking at the close-up, nice little profile of this edge of this icing, another issue to call out, you can see it's got this this shape that goes around. Yes, so far so good. But then it goes up. And it's like, it would be better if it went around and then tucked in and touched the edge of it, because that would look more like real liquid would. So we can solve that by just changing one of the settings in the Solidify Modify. It's not one of those things that you would figure out or know where it is. It's just over time you learn where some of these settings are. But essentially here, the edge data. So we want to change the edge data to say that before you do the solidify step, add a crease on the inner part right here. If we increase this all the way to 1, it now creates a sharpened edge just on that inner part there. So it now creates a sharpened edge just on that inner part there. So the rest of it is a smoothed edge, but the middle one, there's a crease, so it's making a sharp edge there. And it just gives it, it's just a little bit more realism. Just looks a little bit closer to what you would imagine real icing would do. Okay, now for the cool bit. All right. So if you look at reference of donuts, right? Yes, you've got these little wavy bits, but where the icing is really liquidy, it'll often break off from this wave here, and it'll create a trail that goes down underneath the donut, right? It just sort of drips all the way down. Whoops, bumped the microphone. So we can do that, but not the way we were doing it before. If we just took one of these points and then like dragged it all the way down like that, there wouldn't be enough information there, right? You can see you just get this like stretched look, and it doesn't look great, okay? So essentially we need to give it more information, and we couldn't just do it by like adding more and more subdivision surfaces. We need to actually like break this shape here and create a new shape that goes down. So we need to extrude. So if I select this vertice and then the one next to it by holding down Shift, I don't think I mentioned it, but yeah, if you want to select two things at once, it's Shift select. Anyways, so if we select two vertices like that, we want to extrude it downward by hitting E. So when you tap E, it's similar to G in that you're in a placement state now, saying where do you want to place this? So I'm going to move it down to, like about there where I want the trail to stop, and I'm just going to do click, left click, and it's now placed it there. Now, it's hard to see it, but if I just switch to wireframe, you can see what it's doing. So it's created this breakaway shape here, an entirely new face that's completely separate to what we've got there currently. And what this means is if we go to object mode, you can see it's not just like continuing this form here, it's pulled it down, right? Which is exactly what we want. And in fact, I want it to go even further than that. So I'm going to select those two vertices, and I'm going to pull it down again, and then I'll do it again. Shape, and I'm just going to do click, G. Extrude it downward by hitting E. So when you tap E, it's similar to G.
That's very cool. And I need to select the edge. Click. What? It looks awful. think I need another. Oh no. That's no good.
That you're in a placement state now, saying where do you want to place this. So I'm going to move it down to, yeah, like about there where I want the trail to stop, and I'm just going to do click, left click, and it's now placed it there. Now it's hard to see it, but if I just switch to wireframe, you can see what it's doing. So it's created this breakaway shape here, an entirely new face that's completely separate to what we've got there currently. And what this means is if we go to object mode, you can see it's not just like continuing this form here, it's pulled it down, right? Which is exactly what we want. And in fact, I want it to go even further than that. So I'm going to select those two vertices, and I'm going to pull it down again, and then I'll do it again. And the reason I've done this 1, 2, 3 is that this detail here is important so that it conforms to the shape of the donut. Because if there's not enough, you're going to have that clipping issue that I showed you earlier. So that's pretty good. And now we're going to do it again. Originally in my earlier versions of the donut, I only did like one of these, but then I noticed that in the render, the final render, it's often the most interesting part of the donut. So now I'm thinking, yeah, just do it all the way around the donut. Just add the bit that looks cool. Add more of that. So here, so wherever there's essentially like a big dip is what I'm looking for. Like where the liquid would sort of build up and then like the surface tension there would be just too much, and then it would break away. And it would go down underneath like that. And we'll do another one here, why not? Like that, and down, and down. And that's pretty good. Haha, lovely. So that concludes, finally, this heavy part of the tutorial. So if you're ready to watch the next part, hope you're not giving up. You can click there on the screen and I'll see you there. Make sure you hit subscribe as well if you haven't. A large number of you don't. But if you want to see more Blender tutorials, that's what you need to do. Self-promotion right there. Thanks, guys. See you in the next part.
Let me give it some materials. This thing's tiny. that's good enough. Sleepy time. I'll get back to this later.